Would you live on $133 a month for food?
I should try it because you know how fabulous I'd look? I'd be so skinny. I mean, have my abs 10 pounds, it really does. I would be looking great.
We really messed up. And we're all very sorry. I personally apologize to you that happened.
I am the worst journalist in the world.
The White House soup of the day, my favorite radio guy in Fort Lauderdale, it's minestrone chicken sausage.
I want you to watch what we're about to do because you've never seen anything like this on television.
Hey guys, I'm Abby Martin, and this is Breaking the Set. Today in Dallas, Texas, George W. Bush was joined by the 4 other living presidents to commemorate his newly opened presidential library. The dedication of this building was truly an emotional experience for all.
Mr. President, let me say that I'm filled with admiration for you and deep gratitude for you about the great contributions you've made to the most needy people on earth.
I was impressed that President Bush invites us to make different decisions if we choose on the decisions he was facing. It's one of the most interesting things about this library.
So we know President Bush the man, and what President Clinton said is absolutely true. To know the man is to like the man.
It's the honor of a lifetime to lead a country as brave and as noble as the United States. Whatever challenges come before us, I will always believe our nation's best days lie ahead. God bless.
Oh, Bush. Well, of course America's best days are ahead. After all, how could we possibly topple the wrongs committed during your presidency? The illegal wars of aggression, the blatant use of torture against alleged enemies, the war on privacy, and that's just scratching the surface. Of course, while the media was tuned into Bush's tears, nobody mentioned his true Medal of Honor, that of a war criminal. And nobody pointed out how this library is blatantly whitewashing his legacy. And interestingly, one of the same day the government's lionizing Bush, Iraq is falling into a bloody civil war, experiencing another series of bombings just today that left 35 dead. At the same time as this underreported tragedy is making headlines, the media is also ramping up the rhetoric of Syria's chemical weapons as a precursor to invade. Sound familiar? The irony of all this just made my head explode. So grab some pain pills and stick around to break the set. For weeks now, I've been reporting on this show and working off-air to raise awareness about the dangers of the cyber bill CISPA. It's a bill that would allow private corporations to share private user information with the federal government under the auspices of protecting us from the looming cyber Pearl Harbor. Well, today, the bill essentially died in the Senate. But that's only sort of the good news. What if I told you that all the provisions inside this bill that are such a threat to privacy have already been part of everyday practice by the federal government? Yep, as troublesome as this sounds, the Department of Defense has been implementing a secret cybersecurity program that monitors online activities in the same exact way that CISPA would have legalized. And we know this because of documents recently obtained by the Electronic Privacy Information Center, or EPIC, through a recent FOIA request. In a statement issued about their findings, EPIC stated, "These documents concern a collaboration between the Defense Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and private companies to allow government monitoring of private internet networks." Now, some of you might wonder how the government could be getting away with this. I mean, don't we have privacy laws that would prevent this sort of egregious violation of our rights online? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? According to CNET's Declan McCullough, who's been reporting on the document's findings, senior Obama administration officials have secretly authorized the interception of communications carried on portions of networks operated by AT&T and other internet service providers, a practice that might otherwise be illegal under federal wiretapping laws. Let me repeat that. Secret authorization of online spying against federal law. Guys, this is huge. The Justice Department is authorizing giant telecommunication corporations to break federal privacy laws and granting them immunity to do so. Oh, keep in mind, if it weren't for this FOIA request, we wouldn't even know about the extent that the Pentagon had already ramped up online surveillance, with none the wiser. What's perhaps most ironic in this recent revelation, though, is that we've been so vocal about the dangerous implication of CISPA passing, when the worst of the bill is already being practiced entirely in secret. But I guess that's the Obama administration's MO. Violate our rights first, codify those violations into law second. Amidst last week's barrage of violence and tragedy, all eyes were on the media for breaking news. One such story from the Associated Press's official Twitter account at 1:07 p.m. on April 23rd tweeted the following disturbing news. It said, breaking, 2 explosions in the White House and Barack Obama is injured. Well, thousands of retweets instantly followed, only to find out minutes later that the report was completely false when AP revealed that their account had been hacked, and they quickly redacted the story. But not quickly enough for the economy to take a hit. Check this out. The Dow Jones, which was up, suddenly plummeted within just 2 minutes of the tweet, and then recovered just as quickly as the news was debunked. This reveals just how integrated social media has become with global economic trends. So joining me now to discuss this story and more financial news is Perry-Ann Boring, the host of Prime Interest, a brand new finance show to be launched right here on RT very soon. Thank you so much, Perry-Ann.
Thank you.
So what does it mean for the stocks to respond so quickly to news of a potential attack? What the heck does this plunge in the Dow Jones even mean?
Well, what we may not realize is that the majority of trades are done electronically. It's estimated maybe about 95% of all trades are done electronically through high-frequency trading. So we have specialized trading firms that have algorithms that use formulas to trade on. And what we saw on the Dow Jones is now that they're monitoring social media. About 3 weeks ago, the SEC ruled that public companies could put information about investments on social media. And this is the most recent development of that.
So break this down a little bit further, because for people who don't really understand what algorithms are, I mean, when something reacts so quickly and takes a plummet and then goes back up, I mean, we're talking about actually these things are being automated. I mean, things are literally being automated on the stock market.
So it's not humans. Computers have taken over, and that's why it happened so fast. And that's why during this market crash we saw this week, it happened within less than 10 minutes. The Dow Jones crashed and it came back up. And only something electronically could respond that fast.
Right. So what you're saying is robots are taking over the planet. I'm just kidding. No, it's scary because I can't help but think what's going to happen when something real does happen and the stock market does plummet. That is a really interesting question to ask. But while we're on the subject of finance and the internet, I want to ask you about the Marketplace Fairness Act. This is a new bill, a lot of proponents and opponents on both sides of the coin. What does this bill entail and how could it affect online commerce?
Right, this is the online sales tax, and what it does is it requires online companies that sell products online to collect, remit, and calculate the sales tax to whoever's buying in whatever state they live in. So if you're Amazon and you sell across all 50 states, this is going to be a major regulatory burden on your business. So larger businesses like Amazon will probably be able to absorb those costs, but some of the smaller online retailers might not.
And so what are the proponents and opponents saying is to benefit and lose from this?
Well, people are calling it the Marketplace Fairness Act because brick and mortar stores are competing against internet stores, and internet stores are getting away with not collecting all the taxes at times. So people who are for it are brick and mortar stores. But there's also a $84 million lobbying force behind this from Verizon and Viacom. So there's a lot that's going into the works on who's pushing it and who's not.
Right, yeah. Sometimes it just takes a look at who's pushing the bill to really find out who stands to benefit the most. Some criticism that I've heard about the bill, though, is that it's kind of like a taxation without representation, because it's kind of this, you're pooling all your money if you shop a lot online and you don't really know where the taxes are going to. I mean, is that kind of an accurate assessment of a critique of the bill?
Well, one thing that members are saying who support the bill is that these are taxes that already exist. It's called the use tax on online goods. And apparently you're supposed to collect these taxes when you file at the end of the year and pay them to your states. So what this would do is enforce the use tax.
Personally, I think the fair taxes are a really interesting concept, something that I think we should talk about on a later show. But speaking of buying stuff online, Bitcoin seems to be the new popular trend, this decentralized online currency. Talk about what it is and why it's gaining popularity.
So Bitcoins are a crypto digital currency. They have a set amount. I think it's 21 million or something close to that. There's about 19 million already mined. It's technically still a fiat currency, but the reason why I like it is because it's a free market invention. It's not something that's centralized through our governments, through central bankers. This was designed, by a smaller company, and we're starting to see a lot of people flock to alternative means of money. So we have Bitcoins. More people are starting to barter with all the recent developments of currency devaluation across the globe. But there are issues with Bitcoins. It may not be the fix-all problem to our monetary systems, but it's interesting to start to see these types of currencies and technologies evolve. And I think this is just the beginning of digital currencies, and we're going to see more and more pop up.
Right. This is just the beginning of kind of that line of thinking to really create something outside of this top-down banking model that's kind of controlling the world right now. Let's talk about your new show, Prime Interest, Farrianne, launching very soon on RT. What can we expect from it?
So Prime Interest is going to be an economic finance show. We're not going to be following the market. I'm not going to tell you the statistics on a day-to-day basis. We're going to get into those details that the mainstream media is not picking up on. We're going to get into the fine print of what's in your prime interest. And I have great producers. We have Bob English and Justine Underhill, who we're all working very hard to bring a great package. It's going to release very soon on RT on the 4:30 time slot, right before your show, very soon.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, Farrianne Boyne. Prime Interest coming up soon.
Thank you.
And if you're wondering what I'm doing when I'm not on air, check me out on Twitter at Abby Martin. If you like what you see, you can follow me there. You'll find all my tweets linking to segments from the show as well as random thoughts I have throughout the day. And also, please help us get Breaking the Set trending on Twitter. Occasionally, I'll throw out some hashtags we can get trending on the Twitter sphere, but only with your help. So head to Twitter and check me out at Abby Martin. And I'll let you take a break from my preaching for now, but stay tuned to hear my interview on the media's role in spreading Islamophobia next.
I got news for you, gang. The world is round. That's a good one, Mac. Thank you. The news begins in the with more attacks. Breaking news. Casualties in Iraq. There's my kid. Don't tell me how much time I spent helping out the Prime Minister. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Eastern. So you say no foreign aid whatsoever. Watch what happens. Coming up next, this is Fox News.
Let me ask you a question.
No, let me ask you a question. Here, on this network, is where we're having the debate. We have our knives out.
The issue is the surveillance state.
How do you justify staying there as a guest?
We are in a situation where the entire...
I didn't agree to talk about the surveillance state.
I want you to watch what we're about to do because you've never seen anything like this on television.
In the wake of the Boston bombings, there's one aspect of the media's coverage that I haven't talked about, the sensationalistic machine that's pumping out fear, racism, and discrimination against one group, Muslims. Take a look.
I don't care if she knew about this. She ought to be in prison for wearing a hijab. This immigration policy of us assimilating immigrants into our culture isn't really working. No, they're assimilating us into their culture. Did she get a clitorectomy too?
Who else does that?
What other theology in this world justifies murdering innocent people? The answer is only radical Islam allows terror murder.
There are some who are getting very leery of all the Muslim students in America. Our own Bob Eckel among those saying, maybe stop granting them visas. Others have spoken of slowing down the number who get into this country, checking them out more closely.
Let me just say this about the access that Muslims have in this country, whether they're American Muslims or whether they're here on a student visa. It is enormous, the access that they have, and it is virtually all radical.
Yes, I know that was all mostly Fox News, but the sentiment of Islamophobia is being echoed across the political and media establishment alike, and has been since 9/11. This kind of rhetoric toxifies the public's perception of the fastest growing religion in the world, one that's inherently peaceful. And unfortunately, this mindset does nothing more than incite hatred and violence against a growing population. So, here to talk about the culture of Islamophobia and what we can do to combat this mindset going forward, I'm joined now by Arslan Irtika, senior editor for the Islamic Monthly and founder of the MuslimGuide.com. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Abby.
So, why is it that when white people go on a shooting spree, it's an aberration? It's considered that they're mentally ill. Yet, when there's a Muslim with a bomb, that is just exclusively terrorism.
It's because, Abby, the term terrorism has been co-opted after September 11th to really only apply when brown Muslim dudes commit an act of terror. You know, in the last year, we've seen the Newtown, Connecticut school shooting. We saw the Aurora, Colorado Dark Night movie massacre. In all of those cases, it was just a white kooky loner that was doing it. Less than a year ago also, we had a white supremacist named Wade Michael Page who walked into a Sikh Gurdwara temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, and slaughtered 6 people in cold blood. And he had a race war ideology, but the term domestic terrorism was rarely used. I assure you, if it was a brown dude who walked into a white church in Wisconsin and killed 6 innocent people, regardless of his political ideology, he would have been referred to as a terrorist.
And also, just there's been multiple bombings of abortion clinics by right-wing Christians. We don't hear them. We don't hear people really talking about that as terrorism either. It's really fascinating. You know, I consider anyone who wants to kill innocent people mentally unstable. Why is there no discussion about their mental stability, and instead the conversation is only about radical Islam and international terrorism, trying to link these kids automatically to some international terror plot?
Well, as you know, in America, we've always needed to have a proverbial boogeyman. We've always needed an enemy. During the 70s and 80s in the Cold War, it was the Russian Red Scare. And now in the millennial age, it's become the Green Muslim Scare. And so, you know, a lot of it is based on Americans' perceptions of what's going on. If they don't know about, you know, a Sikh temple shooting being referred to as an act of domestic terrorism, or if the Newtown, Connecticut school shooting or the Dark Night movie massacre in Colorado are now referred to as domestic terrorism, it shows that there is a disconnect there. You know, a few days before the Tsarnaev brothers were listed as suspects, you know, CNN and other networks erroneously reported that a, quote, dark-skinned male was arrested. Even though this turned out to be false, it shaped the narrative that it was those other guys doing it, and it's not a problem that, you know, white America has as well.
Yes, absolutely. And putting that kind of the preconceived notion out there, kind of the preconditioning almost kind of aids that perception. And a lot of people don't follow up and see if that was later retracted or they don't know who these people were. And the media, of course, is so quick to criticize Obama. And this is really strange to me, for not hastily declaring it to be an act of terrorism. I mean, as if that really means anything, considering how meaningless the word has become in a post-9/11 world, which according to them, him not jumping on within minutes of the Boston bombings either makes him a Muslim apologist or a Muslim himself. I mean, what kind of damage does this extreme rhetoric from many talking heads in the media do to just the conversation that we need to be having in this country right now?
Well, you know, Abby, most people are aware that we are currently or have fought 2 wars in predominantly Muslim nations, that most of our foreign policy today dealing with much of the rest of the world revolves around dealing with Muslim nations. And you saw the the whisper campaigns of Barack being some sort of crypto-Muslim Manchurian candidate. You know, whenever somebody says that Barack Obama is a Muslim, I feel like Jerry Seinfeld should pop out and say, not that there's anything wrong with that. It's a slur today. It's an accepted form of otherization. And, you know, that's part of the reason that President Obama has never set foot in inside an American mosque, because the minute that he would do so during a political campaign, the right-wingers would point at it and say, look, see, we told you so.
It's unbelievable. But if you take these attacks into account, along with 9/11, you're still more likely to slip and die in the shower than you are to die of a terrorist attack in this country. Of course, that doesn't accompany the narrative of fear driving all of this stuff going on. In fact, the large majority of of terrorist plots in the last decade foiled have been concocted by the FBI. The large majority. I mean, what is this manufacturing of terror doing to really aid and kind of breed this undercurrent of Islamophobia?
Well, it's important to keep in mind that a lot of studies have been done that have shown that in the last decade or 2 decades, the vast majority, over 90% of domestic terrorism plots that have been foiled here in the United States were committed by white domestic terrorists. And so, you know, when we hear narratives about, you know, Islamic terrorism being, you know, the sort of existential threat of our time, you know, it's one of the threats. There are a lot of threats out there. You know, a few years ago, there was a 48-year-old white American Tea Party member named Joe Stack who flew his single-engine plane into an IRS building in Austin, Texas. Now, if it was a brown dude who had flown his plane into an IRS building in Austin, Texas, we would have shut down every IRS building in the country. We would have shut down every federal building in the country, and we would have called it what it is, an act of terrorism. But because a right-wing nut named Joe Stack and not Ali Muhammad did something, it's not an act of terrorism. And so this double standard in terms of the term terrorism needs to be called out.
Right, and of course they just said, oh, he's mentally ill, he's mentally unstable, he's not a terrorist. We didn't see the
right,
police, militarized paramilitary troops in the streets.
Because only white people can have mental illnesses.
Right, of course, of course. And also, just omitting the fact that these kids have cited the wars abroad as a motivating factor. Of course, they're zeroing in on being radicalized abroad, coming home with this radical ideology from Russia and all this stuff, really omitting kind of that glaring aspect, hey, blowback, hello? I mean, is this a real concept?
And at the end of the day, you know, at the end of the day, these guys were just criminal losers.
They're criminal psychos,
and
yeah.
It's something that obviously is, you know, antithetical to any major religious teaching. And, you know, even the mosque in Boston that the elder one went to kicked him out because he started yelling at them during a Friday sermon that was praising Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So even the Muslim community in Boston had shunned this guy, and therefore he went and he radicalized by himself.
But of course, you still hear people like Bill O'Reilly, and I'm just going to paraphrase this because we don't have time to play it, but he basically said that Muslim Americans should apologize on behalf of whenever these things happen. How do you respond to something like that?
Well, I respond by saying, you know, did white Americans apologize after Timothy McVeigh bombed the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City? And then people say, well, you know, religion was an ideology there. Actually, it was. His co-conspirator, Terry Nichols, was a self-professed member of the Christian identity movement. And so why is it that one minority group in America is placed with collective guilt more than any other demographic group in America? If we're going to ask people to apologize for the acts of a few, then we should ask everyone to apologize for the acts of a few. But that's ridiculous because that's a completely un-American principle.
It is. And like you said before, I keep going back to this proverbial boogeyman. I mean, every generation has their own, and really it necessitates these perpetual wars. I mean, you need this proverbial boogeyman for people to be scared of, to dehumanize the enemy, to allow these wars to continue. It really is just a vicious cycle. And unfortunately, what accompanies all of this is this extreme discrimination, the incitement of violence, racial profiling, as you said, a Saudi national, which is odd that they called him that anyway, apprehended, interrogated, and then all these calls now from politicians and pundits like to block Muslim student visas from coming into the country. Is this the worst of it, or do you expect more backlash to come?
I expect more backlash to come. I mean, even in the days following the Boston Marathon bombings, you know, there was a report of a Palestinian Muslim woman who wears the hijab, the headscarf, who was accosted by a white male who started yelling profanities at her, saying, F you Muslims, you did the Boston Marathon bombing. A day after the Boston bombings, there was a man in a New York City mosque who was actually followed by an armed individual who was also yelling out anti-Muslim slurs. And so sadly, this has become part and parcel of what many in the American Muslim community have faced since 9/11. And you know, we're going to probably continue to face it for the foreseeable future.
Well, what can we do? I mean, we're becoming more of a melting pot. Islam's one of the largest growing religions. I mean, what can we do to end this guilt by association? And really, how damaging is this to the cultural fabric of our nation? We have about 30 seconds left.
It's very important, and we need politicians. We need members of the administration. We need brave members of Congress and the Senate to come out and challenge, you know, all these right-wing talking points that are coming out. And until we do so, you know, people like myself are going to have to come out into the media and try to humanize Muslims and let people know that just because somebody commits an act of terror, not all brown people are guilty.
Thank you so much. Arsalan Iftikhar, senior editor for the Islamic Monthly and founder of theMuslimGuide.com.
My pleasure, Abby. Thank you.
Despite the tragic events of the Boston bombings, it's important to realize how many equally horrific events occur around the world every day. One of which was a recent round of drone strikes in Yemen, where the U.S. claimed to be targeting al-Qaeda leaders like Hamid al-Radmi. The latest drone strike in the country was a crucial element for the testimony of Yemeni native Faria al-Muslimi when he spoke before the first Senate Judiciary Committee's hearing held on drones. Al-Muslimi began his testimony by stating that al-Radami, the alleged target for that strike, was so well known amongst local officials that the Yemeni government could have captured him easily if the U.S. had just asked them to do so. But it seems that common sense is lacking, so it's unsurprising that the U.S. stuck with their usual MO instead. Well, he explained how truly devastating those two drone strikes were.
Now, however, when they think of America, they think of the terror they feel from the drones that hover over their heads, ready to fire missiles at any time. What a violent militants had previously failed to achieve, one drone strike accomplished in an instant.
Drone bombing is terrorizing these people on a daily basis. But as he just went on to explain, this bombing was anything but an isolated incident. In fact, these sporadic attacks are now expected by people in Yemen and elsewhere who live under a constant state of fear, not to mention that drones have a 98% failure rate at hitting their targets. Sadly, though, it seems that this powerful testimony fell on deaf ears, considering how no one from the Obama administration attended the hearing. And it's not the first time either. In fact, when a House panel conducted a similar hearing back in February, not a single member of Obama's cabinet was present. But the problem doesn't just lie with the White House's lack of acknowledgement. It's also Congress and the mockery they've made of the ongoing warfare. According to Rolling Stone, just moments after al-Muslimi gave that vivid testimony, quote, members of the committee were cracking jokes about being sentenced to death for going over one's allotted time. Yep, no wonder there's no action on a government level when it comes to halting the use of this failed practice. Obama's perfectly comfortable being crowned the drone king, the defense industry making a killing, and Congress, well, they're laughing all the way to the bank.